As ever, huge thank you to the author, FoggyGlassEye. And without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Missing Five, Part 1 of 4, A Bubble of Hopelessness. Let's get straight into that. My name is Bill Campbell. Like many of you, I've come face to face with the impossible and found myself unable to explain my experience away with rationalities. Ever since, I've made it my life's work to find more impossible truths from all across the country, stories that are both real and beyond understanding. And this is one of those stories. My first investigation is centered around the small town of Cooper, Oregon, the home of a mysterious series of missing persons cases from late last year. In my research for the impossible, I came across an intriguing story from a community much like this one, a warning about Cooper that piqued my interest. I don't have any wild ghost stories like any of you guys, but I did go through some Twilight Zone shit a while back. I was heading through Eastern Oregon when my car broke down halfway through Cooper. Man, there's something fucking wrong with that place. Specifically, the adults. It's like everyone just really is depressed, moping around, and all emotional and shit. And for what I heard, 2 kids had gone missing in the weeks before we showed up. But get this, the children of Cooper were completely unsupervised. Just running around on their own, doing their own thing. A lot of them were completely alone when I saw them, and if anyone wanted to snatch them up, no one would be around to witness it. The adults were so focused on themselves that none of them were even watching the kids. That makes no sense, right? Here's the worst part. Though my wife and I were stuck in town while the car was getting fixed, and we started feeling it too. We struggled to even get out of bed the next day. I'm telling you, it's like all of our energy was getting pulled out of us. We were physically and mentally drained at the start of the day. You get out of bed and just want to crawl right back in. Anyway, I don't know if it was something in the air, something in the water, but it was centered around the town. When we got out of there, the draining feeling was gone within hours of leaving Cooper. We were fine that night and doing great the next day. But I'll never forget that place, and I'm sure I'll never will. And you couldn't fucking pay me to go back. From a bit of online searching, I learned that 2 kids had become 5 by the time the Sheriff's Department investigation had come to an official close. Strangely, the story didn't leave the range of local news from Cooper County, and was only reported on after the missing 5 had all been found. I reached out to the man who posted the warning and got a response a few days later. Yeah, I looked into Cooper recently too. I keep googling that fucking town every once in a while, which you'd understand if you'd passed through there like I did. What I could find was so fucked up that I'm glad the media doesn't show more. Could you imagine how terrible the crime scene photos would be if they leaked to the public? It makes my skin crawl. The descriptions are bad enough. You wanted to know more about my experience, so I may as well tell you. Just keep my name out of it. I don't want any association with that place, especially after what happened there. I was driving through town in the way to visit family in Billings, and the car broke down. We couldn't leave the van, so we got a mechanic in Cooper to fix it. And that's when I first realised how messed up everyone was. The guys I talked to were in a strange funk, like their minds were constantly on something else, something terrible. One of them looked like they were on the verge of tears. They didn't seem motivated at all, either. I thought it was just the mechanics, until I went to the motel and saw the lady at the counter was the same way. I learned about the missing children when she saw that my wife was outside with our kid, getting him out of his stroller. She warned me that the sheriff might go forward with the idea of having a curfew, and when I asked why, she told me that a couple of kids had gone missing. When she said that, man, I could just tell that the missing kids were what everyone was so sad about. And I'll tell you, man, I didn't get much sleep in Cooper either. We went sightseeing the first day, but everyone we ran into was just as fucking depressing as the last. The kids, though, they were totally normal. They ran around, played in the yards and the park, some of them completely by themselves. It was like everyone cared that the kids had gone missing, but not enough to actually stop it from happening again, which we both know it did. That's kind of the worst part for me, knowing that things were that bad before the other three were even gone. Whoever was going after these kids, it must have been real easy for them. I couldn't imagine things getting that bad in a bigger town like Billings or Salem. We were in that motel for a few days, and every day felt worse. We didn't want to leave the room. We barely wanted to eat, and my wife got really upset and cried a few times. But I didn't know why. She said it felt like, after we had the kid, postpartum and all that shit. My kid was acting the same, still shitting and crying like always, but the wife and I, we felt drained. When we got the call and learned that the car was fixed, I was behind the wheel and out of Cooper within an hour. Couldn't get out of there fast enough. The thing is, as soon as we put some distance between us and Cooper, we got our energy back, and it didn't take long at all. It was like a switch that was flipped. It was like a bubble of hopelessness, and we just escaped it. As you can imagine, that information was compelling to me. I knew that I needed to investigate the case of the missing five for myself. There wasn't much public information about the story, most reports only covering the discovery of the children, and I needed to know more about the disappearances themselves. And that's why I recently made the trip down to Cooper to uncover the truth. When I arrived, the first thing of note was the lack of any bubble of hopelessness as described by the man who visited Cooper. I did find that the people of Cooper were reserved, mostly quiet and somewhat distant. However, there were adults who seemed unburdened by the dark recent history of the town, and they were very kind to me during my visit. I wished to speak with the then Sheriff Clive Simmons, who just recently stepped down from his position without public comment as to why. However, he declined. And unfortunately, his estranged wife, Deborah, was willing to speak to me. The following is a transcript of that conversation. Thank you for joining me, Mrs. Simmons. As we previously discussed, this interview subject is the series of missing person cases that plagued Cooper last year. I'd like to start by asking about the first disappearance, that of Brianna Thompson. Brianna, yes. Back in the beginning, when we thought it was an isolated case, as Clive would call it. People spent more time gossiping about the whole thing than worrying back then. Me, more than most. The girl went missing near the elementary school that we knew, Cooper Elementary. Just down the road from her neighbourhood, Jennifer, Brianna's mother, had just given the girl permission to walk home from school that year after taking the bus the years before. You might not have heard that though, because the news didn't cover it. That's something that spread around the town after one of Brianna's little schoolyard friends mentioned it to his parents. After that got around, everyone thought her mum was involved. People were asking her about it whenever they saw her, but she never gave them a straight answer, and even seemed like she was avoiding going into town. We were sure she had something to do with it. If she wasn't involved, what was she hiding, right? I could just tell that she had something to do. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was asking about Brianna's disappearance, not her mother. We both know, in the hindsight, that she had nothing to do with the disappearances. Oh, of course. My apologies. And I know. Everyone ate that humble pie. Me more than most. The girl, right. Anyone who didn't suspect Jennifer Thompson just thought Brianna tried to take a shortcut and then got lost. That was Clive's theory anyway. After the first boy went missing, I assumed that they'd been abducted by some kind of pervert. I didn't see anything about that in the news coverage. Was that a popular theory earlier on? Oh, of course it was. Even more so, later on. One cute little girl, and people might think a predator had taken her. 2, 3, 4 children. That was a pattern. Didn't have to be a sheriff to see that. Speaking of the sheriff, your husband Clive was the sheriff at the time, and he recently stepped down. Did he ever speak with you about the case? Oh yes. Clive and I had quite the morbid conversations about the pervert theory, actually. I told him again and again that some sort of predator was taking those innocent little children, but he never bought into it. Just like how he ignored my speculations about Jennifer Thompson. As far as he was concerned, there should have been a pattern to the kids, something about the way they looked or the lifestyles that connected them. I did a lot of Googling to see if that made any sense, and found all sorts of examples of these child killers who didn't have a type at all. There's this one fascinating case you might know about, the Beast of New Jersey or whatever. And he went after all kinds of children. Clive didn't listen to me, of course. What was his theory then? Oh, he thought someone was taking them at first too. He just didn't know why. After the third went missing and he put the curfew into effect, Clive thought that it would be over, or at least that no one else would be lost. We both know that that didn't work though. I find that very interesting. How you said that your ex-husband thought that it would be over at that point. No one had been found, correct? How could it be over? Note: Deborah was silent for quite some time before responding. People had lost hope by then. The deputies kept looking, but they weren't finding anything, not even a trace of any of the kids by then. By then, most of the manpower was used to patrol the streets and keep an eye out for anything suspicious. Clive stopped trying to look for anyone. He settled on trying to prevent anyone else from dying too. He thought they were dead? Yes. Did you? Note: again, a long pause from Deborah. Yes, but everyone did, not just me. Everyone. Let's talk about those preventative measures. Clearly the sheriff's department focus turned from investigating the disappearances to stopping anyone else from going missing. What besides the curfew did they do to protect the children? Oh, well, that's about it. The curfew was sundown and the deputies would drive around town keeping an eye out. It didn't work, obviously. But didn't the children all go missing in the afternoon? Steve Palmer, the second child. Didn't he even come home for lunch? How would a sundown curfew help that? You know, you're right about that. That's very strange now that you mention it. Were the children at least watched during the daytime? Someone who visited Cooper shortly after Steve Palmer's disappearance described it as children being completely unsupervised, despite the disappearances. Well, I mean, I wasn't watching them, but I don't have any kids. It wasn't my job. Why weren't the parents keeping their children in sight, or at least keeping an eye on them? I don't know. You have to ask them. Did you notice an increase in the children of Cooper wandering unsupervised after the disappearances? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to them. Fair enough. I'd like to go back to the first disappearance. You said that Clive was more hopeful when it was just Brianna. What exactly did the sheriff's department focus on when she went missing? Note: Deborah took a moment to compose herself before answering. They were searching the woods by the school, mostly. Clive had a lot of problems with his deputies at the time, but he didn't talk much with me about it. That led me to some, arguments between us. I still overheard some of it, of course. From what I could tell, the deputies looked, but not as hard as they should have. Everyone had their own excuses: headaches, backaches, foot cramps, you name it. But the point is that everyone had one. It was like they were trying to find reasons to stay away from the woods. Do you think that, even on a subconscious level, that they knew what was there? No one could have guessed that. But in any way, I call them lucky for having those excuses. You said that the deputies gave a lot of excuses. What would you say, they were more lazy or fatigued? Oh, Clive certainly thought it was them being lazy, but I didn't agree. There were excuses, but more like someone begging for a break to rest up. I think fatigued is a good description of that. Was that an isolated case with the deputies, or more something the whole town was feeling? Note: at first, Deborah seemed confused by that question. She thought about it for a minute before answering. Now that you mention it, people were dragging their feet a lot back then. I remember going to the grocery store and seeing that some of the fruit on display was beginning to rot. But even after complaining about it, it took a few days for anyone to remove the bad fruit. No one seemed motivated, that's for sure. Did you feel the same way? Well, I was upset by what was happening, but no, I was fine. Okay, let's return to the theories. So after the fourth child, Carlos Navarro, went missing. People's theories changed. The curfew wasn't working, and children were still going missing. Did you have a new theory at that point? Actually, I don't think I did. Something had changed, and it wasn't just me. Everyone in Cooper was even more depressed, moping around, keeping to themselves. It was like all of our energy, it was gone. Oh, and that affected the investigation? Yes, it did. More than we realized at first. It took a bit of shock for the cobwebs to shake out. I was in the living room when Clive, he got a call. This was a few days after the fifth one, Andy Roberts, went missing. By then, Clive was just lost. Nothing had worked. The curfew didn't stop. The constant deputy patrols didn't stop it. Nothing seemed to even prevent this from happening. But then, the deputy called. About Michael Roberts. Yes, Andy's older brother. After Andy went missing, their parents called Michael to let him know, and he came right back into town after a couple of days. As soon as he got in, Michael started looking for Andy, and he made a lot of waves doing it. It got the beehive buzzing. He was knocking on the doors, talking to anyone he saw in town, all of that. And from what I understand, it didn't take him very long to realize that people had given up like they did. And soon, it was like he was running his own investigation. It all sounded very exciting. When he got the call that night, Clive had already heard a lot about Michael. In fact, he received a complaint from the principal of Cooper Elementary earlier, the same day. Something about Michael being verbally aggressive when asking questions about what happened to his brother. Clive decided to look into it next day. Tomorrow, he'd always say, "I'll get to it tomorrow." Michael didn't want to wait until tomorrow, and from what Clive told me, Michael had spent the whole day searching those woods, and by the time he found the trail and called the sheriff's department about it, the sun was too low to send search parties out. At first, that's what Clive told the deputy. "We'll look tomorrow. It's too dark. What's the damn rush?" That kind of thing. But then something changed in him. The more he heard about what Michael had found, the more I could see something in his eyes. What was it? Hope. And I'm honestly sickened to say that I didn't even recognize it at first. I'd like to ask you about one more thing, and it may be a strange question. As I mentioned earlier, I spoke to someone who visited Cooper between the second and third disappearances, and they described the way the town seemed to be suffering from a mass depression. He called it a bubble of hopelessness. As someone who has lived in Cooper since long before the first disappearance, could you attest to the experiencing the same phenomenon? I mean, we were sad, sure, but why wouldn't we be? Everyone was in a funk, and with so many children going missing, it is no surprise that you might feel hopeless. That's why we had the curfew, because the kids just weren't safe. Yes, but I'm talking about after the second disappearance, before the curfews were even in effect. I don't know what sort of bubble nonsense you're talking about. People were sad. That's no mystery. But earlier, you described the same feeling after the first disappearance, correct? And not just with the deputies. Well, that was different. It was mostly the deputies anyway, right? Didn't I say that? Then answer me this. After the children had been found, how long did it take for the town to get out of this funk? Note, Deborah took another moment to compose herself before responding. You do know the state those children were in when Clive found them, right? We didn't just get out of it. How could we? Clive never did, and that's why he quit. Did this bubble of hopelessness appear before or after the Thompson girl went missing? What? It's a simple question. I don't remember. Things were fine. They were quite fine. They were quiet. Why does it even matter? The description I received from a visitor was of a town pacified by hopelessness, full of vulnerable children who roamed the streets without any supervision despite recent disappearances. If the bubble appeared after the Thompson girl went missing, that would be one thing. But what if it came before she did, like some herald of horrors to come? That's insane. What are you getting at? What are you implying? If something caused this bubble to appear over Cooper, then they may have intentionally made the town and the children vulnerable. If that's how it happened, then something pacified the adults and made the children easier prey to be preyed upon. And tell me, was Cooper in that state before the Thompson girl was even missing? Oh, I don't know. I wasn't feeling myself at the time. I thought I was coming down with something. So, it was happening to you. At least, is it possible that all of Cooper was feeling the same way? It's not possible. It's not impossible, I suppose. What about after? After what? Please stop, you're upsetting me. Deborah, answer me. How long did the aura last after the children were found? Note, again, Deborah remained silent for quite some time here. Maybe a day. The investigation into the missing five will continue in 2 days, with a more detailed report of my time in Cooper and the beginning of the 3-part interview with Michael Roberts. Stay tuned. The Missing Five, Part 2 of 4, White and Bloated Grief. Let's get straight into that. Welcome back. 2 nights ago, I introduced you to the town of Cooper, Oregon, where 5 children went missing over the course of several months late last year. In my previous entry, I covered the strange phenomenon known as the bubble of hopelessness, which pacified the adult population of Cooper during the months of the disappearances. After confirming that this potentially paranormal occurrence had plagued Cooper, I turned my attention to the missing children, under the impression that whatever sinister forces affected the adults was also responsible for the disappearances. Most relatives of the missing 5 either declined or ignored my requests of an interview, but 2 people agreed to meet with me. The first was Anthony Navarro, the uncle of Carlos Navarro, the 4th of the missing 5. I spoke with him during my recent visit to Cooper in a diner across the street from the park where Carlos went missing. The following is a transcript of that conversation. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Navarro. Anthony. Okay, Anthony. As we discussed already, I'd like to speak with you about the disappearances. By the time Carlos went missing, Cooper had a curfew in effect and deputies patrolling the streets at night. When during the day did Carlos go missing? Early afternoon. Curfews didn't do shit. Was he alone? Unsupervised? No. I was here in the diner. He was over in the park, at the playground. His mum asked me to watch him. She was stressed out and needed a break. A break from watching Carlos? Yes. It was tough on her. She tried to keep him safe after the others went missing, but it was hard. What made it difficult? He was running off, exploring, playing. Maria had a hard time keeping up with him. she had a whole house to take care of, you know? I was under the impression that she was a stay-at-home mother. Wasn't she used to the difficulty of spinning all those plates at once? Well, Carlos always liked to explore, but it got worse after other kids started going missing. She wanted him inside, so he needed to go outside, right? And Maria thought of having you bring Carlos to the playground would be a safe place while allowing him to get some energy out, correct? Note, this comment seemed to upset Anthony. Yeah. So you were supposed to watch Carlos, but as you said, you were across the street in this diner. Why not keep a closer eye on him? I had a headache that day. He liked to talk, so I needed a break. Yes, I heard things were tough on everyone during these disappearances. Were you suffering from these headaches the whole time? All day, yeah. I mean during the disappearances, those few months at the end of the during the disappearances, those few months at the end of last year. Yeah, that too. It must have been what it was. I don't remember my head hurting before it started or after it ended, so yeah, it must have been the stress. Did it get worse after Carlos went missing? No, it was the worst it had been the day that he went missing. My head was pounding. I couldn't think. I thought I'd have to go to the hospital, but I knew I couldn't afford it. And then Carlos was gone. So, you had a terrible headache during the time in which you were meant to be watching Carlos. Do you remember when the headache started to fade? Well, it got really bad, so bad I could barely see. And then Carlos went missing. And when the pain went away, I looked through the windows and noticed he was gone. Do you remember seeing anyone around before the disappearance? Anyone suspicious? No. I told the sheriff that when he talked to me about it the day after. He waited a day to talk to you? Yeah. But I was okay with that because I needed to rest after my headache. It sounds like you weren't too concerned with Carlos being gone. Now why is that? Don't say that to me. That's not fair. I was in pain, and it got worse when he was gone. But you just said the headaches were at its peak during the time he went missing. Now you're saying it got worse. Which is it? No, not my head. My heart. I knew I fucked up. I had to watch him. But I didn't. Did you already believe he was gone for good? Note, Anthony began to cry after this. After a few minutes, he continued. I know Maria can never forgive me. I deserve it. I'm not judging you, Anthony. From what I gathered, these were tough times for everyone in Cooper. You didn't intentionally neglect Carlos. Yeah. As I'm sure you know, the sheriff's department has their own narrative about what happened to Carlos. I don't think they're going to be entirely honest with us. In fact, I'm under the impression that Sheriff Simmons knows exactly what happened to those kids. When I ask if anything suspicious happened that day, I'm trying to find the truth, not accuse you of anything. I get it, but that's why I took the interview. The bare bullshit makes no sense. I thought you could give me answers. Well, I understand. I want to know what it really was too. That's why I need to know what you saw. Okay. I want to help, but I didn't see anything. I was at the diner. I kept glancing over and seeing Carlos run around, but I didn't see anything, I swear. Was Carlos alone on the playground? There were other kids around, but no one else, no adults, definitely no bear. Did you recognize any of them? The kids? Yes. No. I don't just sit at parks and stare at kids. Bill, I'm not a creep. Who did you last see with Carlos before you noticed he was gone? Was he spending time with any children in particular? Yeah, actually, a girl. Around his age maybe. Blonde hair, I think. Blonde. Wait a moment. Note. At this point, I retrieved a set of pictures from my bag, placing 3 of them in front of Anthony. The pictures of Carlos Navarro and Andy Roberts, school photos used in the media coverage of the disappearances, remained in the bag. Anthony, were any of these children at the park that day? Note, Anthony looked over the first two briefly, then paid close attention to the third. He looked at it closely, then towards the park across the street, and then back at the photo. Yeah, this one. She was talking to Carlos. Who is she? You really don't know who that is, Anthony? No. That's Alison Geller, the third missing child. During my time in Cooper, I have learned that the wounds of the past year's tragedy were still fresh, and discussion of the missing five had become somewhat taboo. Despite the public declaration that the case had been solved, the few residents who would speak to me seemed unconvinced. In fact, suspicion and conspiracy seemed directed mainly at Sheriff Simmons. One resident who wished to remain anonymous confided in me that the town breathed a sigh of relief after Simmons retired and moved out of Cooper. But they haven't let their guard down. They and other parents continue to closely watch their children, worried that whatever or whoever came to town last year could possibly return. The people remember the feeling of hopelessness this resident told me, because a little part of it remains even after the case was solved. It doesn't matter if no one else goes missing, they told me, because the ones that did ain't never coming back. Michael Roberts wasn't hard to get a hold of, but quite difficult to convince. This was, in part, due to his busy course schedule at university. However, he was sceptical of my intentions, as he seemed convinced that I was trying to write a hit piece on former Sheriff Simmons. The following is taken from an email and shared here with Michael's permission. Listen, man, I don't know what your goal is here, but I know for a fact that Simmons is a good guy. You either have no idea of what really happened, or you do, and you don't care. I'm not going to let some journalist smear a good man's name. Without him, I wouldn't have found the kids. When I clarified in my response that I was investigating the way that adults of Cooper were seemingly affected by an outside force, he responded quite quickly. The Hope Eater. You know about it too. Okay. I'll be in Cooper in June, so I'll speak to you then, in person, if you're willing to make the trip. I'm going to go out on a limb and trust you. Don't burn me on this. Michael Roberts spoke with me several times during my stay in Cooper. We met up at his mother's house, where he was visiting over the summer. The first interview took place during a walk down a road south of the neighbourhood, a road surrounded by trees, power lines and not much else. This was one of Michael's conditions for the process, as he wished to tell Andy's story in his own way. The following is a transcript of that first conversation. Before I went out of state, my family was really close. It was my parents, Andy and me, and we got along great. The only real tension we ever had in that house before I went to college came from the fact that it wasn't an out-of-state university. Andy didn't like that, but he got over it. I made an effort to visit every chance I got, and so we made the best of it whenever I was back in town. But he told me more than once that it was really lonely being the only kid at home. Last year was going to be different though. It was my senior year. I was on track to graduate at the end of spring term. I'd made some close friends along the way, and we'd all planned to spend Thanksgiving on campus with each other. Sort of last hurrah before we earned our degrees and went our separate ways. Then I got a call a week before the holiday. It was my dad. Andy had gone missing, and they wanted me to come home. Well, did you know anything about the other disappearances before that? No, and my dad didn't go into any real detail about what happened too. Only saying that they needed me back home, whatever that meant. I got on a plane as fast as I could. The thing is, Andy was just a kid, and he wasn't the type to run away from home deliberately. This was a serious problem, and it sounded like my parents needed my help. As an older brother, I felt like it was my job to find him and make sure he was safe. The thought of Andy not being found made my stomach turn. I got on a plane that evening and my dad picked me up at Pendleton that night. It was a little surreal just seeing my dad waiting for me though. During all my other trips home, my parents and Andy were all in the parking lot to greet me. We'd hug, then pile into the car, and Andy would talk my ear off during the entire car ride home. When I got into the car that night, of course it was different. I thought that my dad would spend the whole ride telling me about the circumstances surrounding Andy's disappearance, but instead, we drove in silence. As soon as we got home, my dad put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Thanks for being here, Mikey. It means a lot." I was like, "Yeah, of course." But I was really worried about him. He sounded so defeated, like he'd brought me to Andy's wake. I didn't know whether my dad was jumping to conclusions or if I wasn't taking it serious enough, but something was wrong. So I said, "Dad, I need to know what's going on here. What happened?" His grip tightened for a moment before he let me go. "We'll talk about it after you get settled in," he said before getting out of the car. I followed him inside, still not sure what I was walking into. I went straight up to my old bedroom to unpack. I remember, God, I totally forgot this when I passed the door to Andy's room. I heard my mum on the other side crying. I'd been wondering where she was, and when I heard her, I decided to give her space. I spent a long time in my bedroom that first night, unpacking some of my stuff, letting the malaise of the house wash over me. That's a good word, malaise. That's what 4 years of college does for your vocabulary. Shit, that sounds pretentious. Cut that part out. Note, sorry, Michael, but that was too funny not to keep in, and we need all the light-hearted stuff we can get. The point is, something felt so hopeless, so final about Andy's disappearance. I needed to know why, but I didn't want to just push it, just yet. They both seemed so upset. I distracted myself by looking over what I hastily packed in a rush to make my flight. A lot of jeans and t-shirts, another pair of shoes, a tube of toothpaste but no toothbrush. This entire situation had thrown me off, and I hadn't found my balance yet. I didn't even have the energy to unpack it all. That night, my dad ordered takeout and called us down to have dinner. And that's when I first saw my mum, and she looked sick, thin, pale. It was like she was in mourning. I tried to ask my dad about Andy, but he pushed it off. After dinner, he said. It was a quiet dinner. My mum poked at her food and my dad was woofing it down like he was in a hurry. I decided to match his pace so we could get to talking. The moment my dad finished eating, though, he stood up. He started to leave the table, and I was like, "Wait, we need to talk." He just started shaking his head. Tomorrow, he said, more of a plea than a promise. "No," I refused. I was so frustrated that I couldn't take it. "This doesn't make sense. Why aren't we out looking for Andy? I was under the impression that you brought me home to help find him, but you're both acting like he's dead." "Tomorrow!" he roared. I'd never seen him so angry before, face red, eyes bulging. This was foreign territory for me, to say the least. Then my mum piped up. "He needs to know," she said, almost a whisper. My dad shook his head, started pacing around his side of the table like a caged animal. He was like, "No, I can't do this, not right now. No, I can't. He gave up trying to explain himself and then retreated upstairs. The moment I heard my parents' bedroom door close, I turned to my mum. I asked her, straight up, "Is Andy actually gone?" Without looking up, she explained. "We did look, at first," she told me. "It wasn't just us. Practically everyone in the neighbourhood helped us look for her." "Her?" I didn't understand either. She clarified, though. And what she said broke my heart. She told me about the Thompson girl. She said that everyone went looking around the neighbourhood. It was a whole thing. And then she started talking about the kids' parents, her mum specifically. Jennifer Thompson. I'm sure that's right, but I didn't know her name. My mum just went into her, told me that she watched the kids' mum start to give up and accept that the girl wouldn't be found. She said she couldn't watch that woman give up because she was so worried that it could happen to her. Sure enough, over the past couple of days since Andy didn't come home, she started seeing that face in the mirror every morning. I'll never forget how she phrased it. It was maddening watching another mother's hope just curdle and become white, bloated grief, she said. It makes you want to pull your hair out. It stinks. It's rotten. I'd never heard my mum speak that way. She always had a way with words, but not like that. Haunting. Yeah. Note, we walked in silence for a while after that, before Michael eventually continued. After that, she started telling me about missing kids. First was the Thompson girl who lived down the street from my family. My mum said that Andy took it hard because she was really nice to him. He even invited him to her birthday party the previous year when she was new in town. My mum told me about the parents, and everyone started looking everywhere. They looked through the neighbourhood, the school area, the woods nearby, everywhere. The kids helped, and from how she described it, it really was that they were the ones who did the looking. Wait, so the children were being proactive? Yeah, and the adults, from the sound of it. Mostly supervised. That came to a stop when one of the kids didn't come home though. You can imagine how fucked up that was to hear. It went from one kid, my brother, going missing, to 3. I asked how many were missing. She frowned and looked up for a moment, and I could see that she had to count the missing in her head, which made my stomach turn. As she counted it, my mum said it was the Thompson girl, then a boy from a few blocks down. After that, it was one of the Geller twins. She couldn't remember which. And after that, it was one of Andy's school friends, Carlos. And then Andy. Yeah, I said the same thing. You know what she said to me after that? Andy makes 5 so far. I got pissed again. I asked her why no one was looking for Andy if so many children were going missing. And she brushed it off. Said that the sheriff had a curfew and the deputies were keeping an eye out. But clearly, hadn't done anything. She just kept making so many excuses, you know? I was just so annoyed by that, so frustrated that I screamed at her. What about Andy? I kept yelling. Shouldn't you and Dad have been keeping an eye on him after 4 other kids went missing? My mum started crying. Before I could apologise for upsetting her, she shook her head. There's no excuse. I thought the school would take care of him, but you're right. Yes, the common theme of parents assuming that others would carry the load. The same happened to Carlos and Navarro. Yeah, she told me all about it. I couldn't find any information about where Andy went missing. I'm assuming now that it was near the school. Similar to Brianna Thompson? Yep, and what's right by the school? The woods. The woods and the trail. The thing is, he went missing during recess on the far end of the field. The only way he could have left without anyone noticing would be by jumping a fence. So why would he do that? Right? I asked my mum that, and she told me that she didn't know. She looked up at me for the first time, and I could see the guilt in her eyes, the powerless grief of a mother who believed with all her broken heart that she had fouled her child. Your brother's smart, even for his age, she said. We don't know what happened, but he's gone, and no one knows where. Gone, and no one knows where. Infuriating, right? There's such a fire under my ass. The defeated way she accepted that Andy wasn't coming home. The way my father couldn't even talk about it without running away. They aren't bad parents, Bill. So seeing this from them just pissed me off so much. I asked about the cops, the sheriff's department, and she told me that it was up to them to find Andy. More unloading of responsibilities onto others. Exactly. She told me how they were trying to stop more kids from going missing, which told me all I need to know. 1, they gave up on all 5 of the kids who were gone. 2, they were fucking bad at stopping more kids from going missing, completely useless. The deputies were taking preventative measures, as she phrased it, but that wasn't doing shit to find Andy. The worst part was realising that this hopelessness was clearly a bigger issue than my family. It was everyone. It was Cooper, There was no effort to solve the problem, just poor attempts at not letting it get even worse. The fact that this nice, pleasant town had given up so quickly, it was soul-crushing, to say the very least. I thought that it had more spirit, more determination than that. And then she told me that it started in September, that the Thompson girl went missing only a couple of months before. It took so little time to break my town's spirit, 2 months or so. That's all it took. I excused myself and retreated to the bathroom upstairs, where I finally allowed myself to throw up. Andy was gone. Had been for days. And he was one of the 5 children to go missing in the span of less than 3 months. I couldn't help but think of how pathetic they were, especially my dad. I couldn't even address what was happening, choosing instead to run away from the problem. Without me there would be no effort to actually find Andy. And I fully intended to find him. I knew I would bring him home, along with all the other kids if I could manage it. I didn't know if that was why my dad brought me home, but I was determined to get it done. The one hope in a hopeless town. Yeah, but it was more than that. I was hopeful, furious, stubborn. The perfect cocktail for leading a one-man search party. Note, Michael stopped walking at this point. Notice anything interesting here, Bill? Not particularly. Between these trees down on the side of the road. Note, I stepped towards what Michael was pointing at, and upon further inspection, realised that there was a dirt path leading directly into the woods. Hard to spot, right? Is this the trail? Yep, it's where I found Andy. That session ended where the trail began, but the interview continued the following day. The investigation into the missing 5 will continue in 2 days, with my second interview with Michael Roberts and a recent development concerning former Sheriff Clive Simmons. Stay tuned. The Missing 5, Part 3 of 4. Where are you going? Let's get straight into that. Welcome back. In the first 2 parts of this 4-part series, I covered the phenomenon known as the bubble of hopelessness, which surrounded the small town of Cooper, Oregon late last year. I confirmed with multiple sources that the adults of Cooper were plagued by a host of symptoms that physically and emotionally pacified them, allowing something to prey upon the town's vulnerable children. We also heard from Anthony Navarro, the uncle of the 4th missing child, Carlos. Anthony claimed to have seen a little girl speaking to Carlos before the boy went missing, and was certain that the picture I showed him of Alison Geller, the 3rd missing child, was that little girl. Finally, I introduce you to Michael Roberts, the older brother of the 5th and final missing child, Andy. Where we last left off, Michael and I have returned to town and realised that his family and the people of Cooper had already given up on Andy. Michael vowed to himself that he would find his brother, and we already know he did. Before we continue with my interviews of Michael Roberts, the man responsible for finding his brother and the rest of the missing 5, I have to address recent developments concerning the former sheriff of Cooper County, Clive Simmons. In this previous entries of this series, we covered how Clive was blamed for many of what they saw as a lack of effort during the investigation of the missing 5. In the months following the conclusion of that case, Clive had retired, separated from his wife, and moved to a small home just outside the city limits of Cooper. Just before posting this second entry of the series, I received a call from one of my contacts in Cooper, a member of the sheriff's office who wished to remain anonymous. This contact informed me that Clive was discovered in his garage last week, unconscious in what seemed to be a clear attempt at suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. He was discovered by his wife, Deborah, who called 911 and saved his life. I reached out to Deborah in hope of an update, but as of right now, she has not returned any of my calls, texts, or emails. Before we move forward, I would like to make it very clear that I do not blame Clive Simmons for the way his investigation turned out. He was dealing with not only the effects of the bubble of hopelessness, but the insubordination of his deputies who refused to follow his direction during the search for these missing children. Clearly, Deborah was correct when she told me that Clive never got over what happened. If you're reading this, Sheriff, then I sincerely hope you find peace. You're not a bad man, and none of this was truly your fault. My second interview with Michael Roberts took place 2 days after our first encounter. I met back up with Michael at the start of the trail, which he had decided that we would walk down during the interview. The following is a transcript of our conversation. Alright, so where were we when we left off? You just returned to Cooper, realised that no one was looking for Andy, and vowed to find him yourself. Yep, that was Friday, the 9th, when I woke up the next day. I felt so drained that I wanted to just go back to sleep. I've heard about this, the effects of the bubble of hopelessness on new arrivals in Cooper. I don't know why you called it that, man. I just called it an aura. It wasn't my phrasing, but sure, an aura. Yeah, so I got out of bed, forced myself to get moving, get going. That weekend was a lot busier than nothing, though we just spent all day, both days, learning nothing and pissing people off. I started trying to talk to the neighbours, but no one was interested. A lot of the kids were out and about, but I didn't want to raise any red flags by talking to them. I tried going around town and asking questions too, but the most I got were dirty looks. People did not want to talk about it, and that didn't stop me though. And then, on Monday, I went to the elementary school after telling the receptionist who I was and showing my ID to prove that I actually was Andy's older brother. The principal brought me to her office to talk about what had happened. Between apologies, they gave me the information that I was looking for. Andy was last seen near the fence at the far end of the playground, and the police said that they swept the nearby area and couldn't find him. I asked whether she would mind if I went looking for him so close to a school playground, and she assured me that there wouldn't be a problem, as the students were having their recesses inside for the time being. I thanked her for her time and left, considering how frustrating it was to hear those measures were being taken after my brother had gone missing under their watch. It reminded me of when I was back in high school. A student killed herself during my junior year, and it was only after that tragedy that the school started putting up suicide awareness posters and organising yearly assemblies about the dangers of self-harm. Before that, there was no effort to stop something so terrible from happening. And it was only after someone had already died that the adults started doing the right thing. It was too little, too late, times 5. I promised myself that I wouldn't be too late for Andy. I decided to take a quick look around the wooded area past the playground fence, so I'd be able to prepare for a more thorough search the next day. I walked along the fence, hoping to find anything that would tell me where Andy had jumped over it. The spot that stood out immediately was near the far end, where the tree line was almost right up against the fence. If I was trying to hop the fence during recess without anyone seeing me leave, that was where I'd do it. So, I would be able to use the trees for cover as I snuck away. Andy was smart for his age, and so I assumed that he would come to the same conclusion. I took a look around the wooded area just past that part of the fence. It was thick with trees, easy for someone to sneak through without being seen. If Andy wasn't seen leaving, then no one would have been seen approaching the area either. That was important at this point, because I had to assume, after so many children disappeared, that someone was actively taking them. About that. Did anyone see Andy leave, or anyone in the area? No. The principal told me that no one saw him leave. I'm sure you know a lot more about this Hope Eater than me, but I already think I know how it got to the children, luring them away without attracting any attention. Dude, you really have no idea what it is. I'm easing you into it because it's fucked up. It's impossible. That's exactly what I'm here for. We'll get there. That's the whole point. Anyway, I thought about returning home and preparing for a big expedition the next day. I was going to buy markers, snacks, a flashlight, all of that. But then I realised that I was excited about it. What do you mean? I was more begging myself to hold off. I wanted to push it until the next day. It was barely noon at the time, but part of me was just pleading with myself to take a break. I wasn't tired though. The aura, in effect. Yeah, I knew something was wrong then, but I didn't know for sure that it was an outside force. At the time, I thought it was me wanting to believe that there wasn't something wrong with everyone else. The shit just made me mad again, so I went for it that day. I just walked right into the woods and started calling Andy's name. You walked blindly into the woods without any preparation, even something with which you could defend yourself in case you ran into whoever or whatever was taking the children. Stupid, right? But at least it wasn't nothing. That's where I knew I had to fight. Inaction, apathy. From the spots where the tree line almost met the fence, I began a thorough search of the area, looking around the woods in that specific direction. For hours and hours I wandered, called Andy's name out, hoping that he was nearby, that he could hear me. It hadn't even been a week since he disappeared, so for all I knew, he'd gotten stuck or trapped somewhere, waiting to be rescued. It wasn't as likely as something sinister having happened, but I needed something hopeful to hold on to, like a light in the darkness of this terrible, terrible situation. It was in the early evening, when my feet were sore from constant walking, my throat was raw from calling Andy's name countless times, that I finally found something. I was considering how much further to go before turning back, when I saw something unexpected ahead. This very dirt trail. The thing I didn't understand was where the trail had come from, or where it was going. I was zigzagging through the area north of the school the whole time, and the path led east and west. If this is that trail, which is also heading north, then you're saying it goes a lot further than this? Yeah, it's a long way, a couple of hours if you aren't wandering through the forest randomly like I was. You'll see it if we get that far today. There's an end to the path. I decided to pick a direction and went east down the trail, calling out Andy's name, obviously with a renewed determination. It didn't take long for the trail to point south, so I knew I was heading the right way to get back to the road. After an hour or so, the trail brought me to a side of the road, to the entrance we use today. I had driven that way to get to school, so I walked back to the car and drove to the trail's entrance. It was hard to spot the trail when you were driving up the road, and if I wasn't looking for it, I was sure that I would have driven past it. That's the road between the school and the neighbourhood, right? So Brianna Thompson, the first victim, was likely taken down this very trail. She was walking home from school and she lived in that neighbourhood. Yeah, that's what I figured too. It snatched her right up. No one would have seen a thing. Anyway, I called the sheriff's department and got in touch with one of the deputies. When I asked how far from the school they'd looked for Andy, he tried to assure me that they'd looked everywhere, but he was surprised when I asked if they'd gone as far as the trail north of the school. When he asked where this trail was, and I told him that it was several miles north of the school, he explained that they went out in all different directions from the fence, and while they did cover a lot of ground, they didn't go that far out in any direction. I was fucking fuming at that. I told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to get his ass down to the trail and help find my brother, because I was only able to do so much of Cooper County Sheriff's Department's job before my back broke from carrying the investigation. You know, something like that. I waited for an hour and the sun was down, replaced by a light rainfall, and by the time their cruisers arrived, to my surprise, the sheriff was with the deputies. Clive Simmons? Yeah, like I told you, he's a good man. He may not sound like it right here, but I tell you, he was essential. I don't want any bullshit on that from you, because there would be dozens of missing kids by now, if not for him. But yeah, he's not going to sound great right now. What happened was, he asked me what made me think that Andy would have gone out this far north. And I explained how the tree line was close to the fence at a specific spot that led in this direction. And he asked me something like, "And you think that we should just take a closer look in this area?" As if it was a strange or pointless request. I was like, of course. He had to leave the playground by hopping that fence, and this trail, wherever it leads, could bring us to where he's been for the last week. Maybe the rest of the kids too. Like, don't you want to find them? And the thing is, I could see the emotional fatigue washing over the sheriff's face. I could see the same hopeless dread that my dad had been plagued by. The dread even you had been plagued by. Yeah. Then he said something that really fucked me up. The other children. You don't seriously think they're still out there, do you? I couldn't contain my frustration at the pathetic question. They could be, I screamed. What is wrong with all of you? I'm sure that your job hasn't been fun the last few months, but whatever funk you're in, you have to snap out of it. My brother could be out there. He could still be alive out there. And you're acting like it's a burden to find him. Wake up, man. He rubbed his eyes and sighed deeply. It's like a part of him was fighting me, but more out of self-preservation than anything. He said, "Okay, listen. I know that it's your brother that you're looking for, so I understand and appreciate the fact that you're going so gung-ho about finding him. That's noble of you. It really is. I'll tell you what. How about we go organise a sweep of the entire area down this trail and clear it all tomorrow morning." Tomorrow, yeah? Always tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word was haunting me. I had to pull myself together to stop from screaming at him. I said, "Sheriff, he's been gone for days. If we don't find him tonight, there's no telling if we'll ever find him. Certainly not alive. I assume you all have flashlights in your cruisers, right?" He didn't expect that, and he said, "You want to do this tonight?" It still sounded hopeless, but now I could see a spark in his eyes. Gears turning in his head, and it was like seeing someone slowly wake up from a bad daydream, like I was pulling him out of it. So I said, "Fuck yes, tonight, right now, let's see where this trail goes. And I know it's raining, and I know it's dark already, but this could be exactly what everyone's been waiting for. If there's nothing at the end of it, then it'll be done, and you can go back to your investigations. But this is a lead, this literal trail to follow. I've dropped it right into your lap. What's the harm in trying?" Then a little smile crept up at the corner of his mouth, and he said, "You know what? I think that's a great idea. We need a little bit of hope at a time like this. It's refreshing. It really is." He turned to his deputies, who had all been silently listening to our conversation, and said, "Winslow, you stay here and keep an eye on things. Schrader, Briscoe, get flashlights from the trunks and umbrellas if you got them. Start walking on either side of the trail. I'll go down the path with Michael and call out Andy's name every once in a while and keep an ear out. Get going." It was like a switch had flipped, like the funk was just gone. I broke the seal, man. He got moving. The sheriff and I started walking down the trail, huddling close under his umbrella. As you know, the trail's like a dirt path, but it just isn't easy to follow between the trees. I had to yell over the rain, which was picking up, and when I asked him if he had any idea where the path was going. "A lot of kids live near here, so my best guess is it could be some sort of fort or treehouse," he speculated. I agreed and said something like, "The kids probably knew about this place, especially anyone who walked home from school. I heard one of the kids went missing looking for the Thompson girl, so maybe he went looking down here." I was just thinking the same thing. It doesn't explain every disappearance, but that's a pattern, yeah. The sheriff only grunted in response when I said that, though. We started calling for Andy again, and soon we reached the part where the path turned west. We were heading in that direction I hadn't seen yet. Note, at this point, we hadn't reached the turn yet. We continued down the path for almost half an hour, long past the turn, before seeing something up ahead at the end of the path. The sheriff was half right while we didn't find a secluded child's fort, we did find a teenager's hangout spot. There were tables and a variety of seats, even an old couch that must have been taken quite an effort to carry all the way down there. The surrounding area was littered with dozens of empty beer cans and bottles. The seats and tables were under a large tarp that had been nailed to the trees above, making it an ideal spot to drink with friends, even in the rain. The ground under the tarp was mostly dirt. We sat at the table for a moment, and the sheriff called his deputies on the radio to let them know we'd found the end of the trail. I started looking around. While not being rained on was nice, it was loud. The tarp was constantly being hammered by rain, and a metallic chorus of empty cans being battered by heavy raindrops was giving me a headache. I was so distracted by the noise that I almost didn't hear the sheriff saying, "Yeah, just head back. Nothing here. No signs the kid even went this way." "Wait a minute," I interrupted. "We haven't even started looking. You just want to head back? He could be here." He looked around and shrugged. "It doesn't look like he's been here." I could see that the spark was out in his eyes with that nonchalant shrug. The gears had stopped turning. He didn't care anymore, probably because of how long it took to find this place. I was getting desperate. I said, "Just hold off for a bit, Sheriff. Rest up for a second. I'll look around." He stood up and grunted again. "No, Michael. I think we've been out here long enough, and he didn't come this way." "You don't know that?" I told him. I started looking around, hoping to see something to prove him wrong, fighting the tired part of myself that wanted to agree with him. "There's nothing here," the sheriff pointed, opening his umbrella. "No!" I screamed at him, wandering further west into the rain. I started calling for my brother. "Andy! Andy!" I yelled. "Andy! Can you hear me? Andy!" Then the sheriff said, "If you don't get moving, I'm leaving you here. You're getting soaked, Michael. Let's head back. We'll come back tomorrow if you want." I just kept calling out, and then, through the rain, I heard someone yelling back. "What?" "Yeah." I started calling to the sheriff, telling him that I heard someone. I could barely hear them, but I recognized the voice. He was calling out, "Hello? Hello?" The sheriff yelled something to me, but I didn't hear it clearly. The voice in the darkness before me started getting closer, clearer. "Hello? Please? Hello?" I yelled for the sheriff again. His flashlight's beam started scanning the area. "Are you sure?" The energy was back in his voice. The energy was everywhere. The hairs on my arms were straight. It was fucking incredible. "Hello?" The voice called again. "My God." The sheriff started mumbling to himself. I looked back for just a moment and saw that his eyes were watering. He handed me the flashlight and got on the radio. "Everyone, head this way. Someone's here. All hands now." "Wait, are you telling me that you found someone alive?" "What?" Yeah, he came walking into the flashlight beam. I had to step out of the way so I could see him in the light. There he was, pale and soaked and freezing. It was Andy. I ran up to him, grabbed him and pulled him in so tight. The part of me that thought it might have been too late for him was just crushed. It seemed so frail then, so weak. I thought he was out of it because he was just looking so confused when he stared back at me. "Are you all right?" I asked him. "It's me, Mikey." He said, "Yes, please, Mikey, take me home." And I did. Just like that. Yeah, the deputies met up with us and we went back down to the path. The sheriff and I took turns carrying Andy, who was passed out most of the time. He didn't seem to have any energy to speak. And by the time we got back to the start of the trail, everyone was just exhausted. When the sheriff told me that he'd talk to Andy tomorrow, I didn't have a problem with it. Hang on, I'm so confused. The report said that there were 5. We'll get there, Bill. We'll get there. So I brought Andy home, and my parents were complete wrecks. They hugged the ever-living fuck out of him, and everyone cried so much. It's like I brought everyone back from the dead, and we were real, living family again. My dad made Andy eat something, which he was annoyed but didn't protest at all. We brought Andy to his room, which my mum had been keeping nice. She had some tissues to clear off his bed, but it seemed otherwise untouched. He told Andy to get some rest and be ready to talk to the sheriff the next day. That feeling of crawling back into my bed that night was probably the best I've ever felt in my life. A hard day's work, a family restored, hope returned to Cooper. Yeah, it was insane. But then, everything changed the next morning. I woke up and felt so much worse than I'd ever did before. My head was pounding. My whole body felt drained. I could barely get up. And it wasn't all the walking from the night before that did it. I got out of bed and saw Andy standing at the door. He was staring at me in a way I didn't understand. I tried to get a better look at him, but it felt like my head, it was going to explode. Then he said something that made no sense. "Where are you going?" I didn't know what he meant, so I asked him. He took a step in, and my head started throbbing even worse. "You're not leaving, are you? Why are you going? Where are you going? A trip? A vacation? Tell me." I don't understand. At first, neither did I. It took a moment. Then I figured it out. What? My bedroom was left mostly intact when I went to college. I spent every holiday, including all the summer, at home. My books, my decorations, my old computer, everything was there. But he saw something that he didn't like. He saw my bag, half unpacked with clothes and toothpaste and no toothbrush, right? Why would he think that? My brother knew what it was like not to have me around better than anyone. He hated it. So why, the day after he comes back home from a week off in the woods, does he think I'm packing? He didn't know the difference, did he? He didn't know, because the person standing in my bedroom wasn't my brother. Note, by this point, we were nearing the turn of the trail. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. The next time we talk, I want to come back here. There's something you should probably see if you really want to understand all of this. Something past the end of the trail. The nest. The nest? Yeah, it's where I found the rest of them. And the rest of Andy. My investigation of the missing five will return and conclude in 2 days. You may have many questions. If not Andy, who or what did Michael bring home with him? If that wasn't Andy, then where is he? And what about the rest of the missing five? I may have no explanations for what our final part contains, but I do have those answers. And those answers are impossible. Stay tuned. The Missing Five, Part 4 of 4, The Hope Eater. Let's get straight into that. Welcome back. Over the past week I've shared with you the story of Cooper, Oregon, a small town plagued by supernatural phenomenon allowed a sinister force to hunt vulnerable children, while the adults remain physically and emotionally pacified by hopelessness. Attempts to verify this story led to the realization that the case wasn't being covered by any news organizations outside of Cooper County, which seemed suspicious to me. To find out what really happened, I've traveled to Cooper myself and interviewed several people connected to the disappearances. Eventually, I learned the truth over the span of 3 interviews with the man who found the missing five, Michael Roberts. Before we continue with the conclusion of Michael's interviews and my investigation, I think now is a good time to share what my theory was before I learned the truth. The following is an almost completely unaltered copy of my notes from the day before my first meeting with Michael. Michael Roberts just texted me. He's in town right now and we'll be meeting up tomorrow. Michael seemed defensive in our emails, especially about my intentions. I'm now under the impression that he experienced something like it like I did with the redacted, and that's he's simply worried that I won't believe him. As of right now, though, I still don't know if I will. Maybe I just want to believe it, but I have doubts. My brush with the impossible hasn't replaced my skepticism with blind belief, and I know that I can believe in the impossible until I rule out all logical explanation. That's the problem, because there's a simple, rational explanation for all of this, that Sheriff Clive Simmons is the man who killed the missing 5. Here's how it could have happened. On the afternoon of Monday, September the 10th, Clive Simmons abducted Brianna Thompson on her way home from school. She was alone. He was the sheriff and he had a gun. Either by convincing her to come with him or taking her by force, Simmons took Brianna captive without any witnesses. This abduction, the most shocking crime to take place in all of Cooper, Oregon's history at the point, triggered a bout of mass hysteria that affected the entire adult population of Cooper. Unaffected by the emotional state everyone else was in, Simmons was able to continue his terrible work without opposition. This led to Simmons kidnapping Steve Palmer and Allison Geller over the following month. These children, at least Allison, were kept alive for the time being. Meanwhile, to play a bit of security theatre, Simmons eventually set a county-wide curfew for Cooper. He set his deputies to the task of patrolling the streets at night, knowing that no one would question this despite the fact that he kidnapped all 3 children in broad daylight. At this point, he was well aware that the people of Cooper were neglecting their children in their hysterical hopelessness. Simmons took advantage of this by convincing his latest abducted child, Allison Geller, to lure Carlos Navarro away from the others for another easy abduction. This method was presumably also used to abduct the 5th and final child, Andy Roberts. The sheriff played an easy game until Andy's brother, Michael, came to town. Unaffected by the hysteria, Michael ran his own investigation, independent of the authorities. Simmons, knowing that his activities were on the path to being exposed, murdered the remaining children and mutilated the corpses. When Michael found the bodies, Simmons declared that a bear had mauled all of the children and then closed the case. After the case was closed and the hysteria ended, eyes fell on the sheriff who let it all happen. To get away from the attention of the public, Simmons quietly separated from his wife, retired, and moved out of the town. The story has no holes, with one exception. Why is Michael Roberts so vehemently defending the sheriff? What does he know about Simmons that I don't? And that's what I need to know. I'm not a religious man, but I pray that Michael has answers for me. My last interview with Michael Roberts took place a few days after our second conversation. My mind was still reeling, and I was desperate for answers. Michael was more than willing to provide them, given that I allow him to call the shots concerning the nature of the interviews. The conditions he texted me for the 3rd interview were simple. Bring a flashlight, pack a lunch and meet me at the start of the trial at sundown and wear comfortable shoes. The following is a transcript of the conversation we had as Michael began to lead me down the trail. So you come to the conclusion that Andy wasn't really Andy? Not exactly. I knew that something was wrong, to the point where I was more suspicious of him than worried for him. I mean, clearly you could brush it off by saying he was confused and just went through something traumatic, but I was skeptical of him. It was easy to keep that state of mind after he spoke with the sheriff that afternoon. Was Sheriff Simmons still in that same funk? The aura of the Hope Eater? Him, everyone else, including me, my headache, it was still killing me, and I could see how emotionally drained Simmons was when he showed up. What happened during the interview that fed your skepticism about Andy? Well, when the sheriff asked what happened, Andy played dumb and said he just got lost in the woods. Both the sheriff and I asked questions, but that was all Andy could say. He didn't have any explanation for why he had hopped the fence, and he didn't have any excuses for remaining lost for so long. I asked how he didn't find the trail, and he just shrugged. That felt like bullshit to me. Did you call him out on it? No, I didn't have the strength. I don't think you appreciate how hard this was to be around him. It's crippling. It's like he's actively feeding on whoever's near him. Like Anthony Navarro? Yeah, same thing. I read the transcript of his interview that you sent me and it sounds just like my experience. So what did Sheriff Simmons say about Andy's story? Was he also skeptical? No, he believed Andy. He came to the conclusion that Andy wasn't one of the real missing children, just a kid who got lost and finally was found almost a week later. But Andy is one of the missing 5, correct? I'll get to that. How many times do I have to tell you to be patient? Bill, this is Andy's story, not mine. Certainly not yours. I'm sorry, Michael. Okay. So this whole thing, living with this false version of my brother, went on for a little while. Nothing really developed until a few weeks later. So Andy was back for weeks, yet no one covered it in the news. You and I both know that the media didn't want to touch the story after it was over. He's just one of the 5 by then. Alright, let's go back to the time living with this imposter. What was it like, sharing a home with someone pretending to be your brother? Yeah, at first, it was really hard. I held on to my doubts about Andy, though, and it was all I had. I looked online and found examples of kids coming home who aren't really the kid that went missing. The Changeling movie and all of that. It was tough to keep strong with it so close. I knew that I needed to go back to school, but I couldn't gather the energy to pack or book my flight. I basically tanked that whole semester because of it. It all felt so hopeless. Then my parents dragged Andy to go Christmas tree shopping, and for the first time in weeks I felt alive again. The weight wasn't gone, but it was much lighter than before. You ever worn an ankle weight for a while, then walk around without them on? It was like that for my entire body, for my mind. That's when I started to connect the dots. I began to realise that Andy wasn't functioning like a normal person. My little brother was never a loner, always bouncing around the house and talking to anyone whenever he ran into them. After he came back home, Andy was spending all of his time in his room, only leaving for meals and the occasional check-up to see what we were up to. He was keeping an eye on you, a watch on you. Yeah. While they were gone, I decided to check Andy's room. What drove you to that? Andy used to leave his bedroom door open, unless he was going to bed. He was an open book. When he came back, the door was always locked. I didn't trust it, and so I thought he was hiding something. What did you find? A smell. A smell like mould and trash. It hit me as I opened the door. This rotted, decaying odour. I forced myself to step inside and found that the bed didn't have any sheets or blankets on it. The bedding was in the closet, and all of the clothes that were used to be hung up had been thrown on the bare mattress. What was the smell coming from? The trash can by his desk. I got closer and saw, to my absolute disgust, that it was just this lot of vomit. The damn thing was almost full of vomit. Before you ask, I didn't know what to think of it all at the time. Andy didn't eat much anymore, so it was clear that he couldn't keep anything down either. So he was regurgitating all of his meals and sleeping in the closet. Yeah, it's fucking weird, right? I made sure I was right about the vomit. By the way, for a few days, whenever we finished eating, I'd wait until he was in his room and go to the door. I could hear him throwing up every time. Clearly there was something terribly wrong. Someone who looked and sounded just like my brother had returned home after he was missing for 6 days. But he didn't know important details about his family and somehow was alive without keeping any food or water down. And by the time I started putting things together, Andy was getting restless. He wanted to wander, but I kept an eye on him and didn't let him stray too far. He tried to leave the house by himself and would stay at home when I insisted on going with him. Wait, what were you putting together? He was getting moodier, snapping at people more. I got the most of it, mainly due to how often I stayed close. But my parents got some of it too. He would yell, throw tantrums, tried to storm off and retreat to his room when I followed him. One time, early in the evening, I grabbed at his arms when he tried to open a back door, and when I touched him, I felt how truly cold his skin was. It felt loose on him. He was losing weight. That's what I thought at the time. Yeah. When he looked at me, eyes filled with hate, I noticed two things that put it all together. The first was that his stomach was growling, and the second was that his eyes were dark. Like his eyes were black? No, dude. No. Hazel. Doe eyes. Let me guess. Andy's eyes weren't brown. Green. Dark green, but green. So I realised what was going on. They wouldn't eat normal food or drink water. They were stuck inside and couldn't wander during the daytime. They didn't have my brother's eyes, but their body looked like him. And they were hungry. I waited until late that night and snuck out of the house. Got my old bike, pumped up the tyres a bit and got going. Where to? This trail. I didn't know if Andy wandered off or found this trail, but I did know that whatever was in my house was found at the end of it. Well, not really. He was found just west of the end of the trail. The ride on a bike is much quicker than on foot. The trail's pretty even, and with a flashlight strapped to your handlebars, it's not a tough ride at all. It only took about half an hour by then. I was pretty tired, but really energised after getting so far away from Andy. Did you ever know about the bubble of hopelessness at that time? Again, Bill. It's an aura. And yeah, clearly. I felt bad after I got into town. Worse when Andy was near. And less bad when I had some distance between us. It was obvious. Also, it's worth pointing out that my headache never got worse than that first day after bringing Andy home. It was always really bad when he got near, but it was like the aura was weakening. It needed to feed to get strong. Exactly. So I got to the hangout spot at the end of the trail and leaned my bike against the table. I removed the flashlight and started wandering west. I didn't get very far before I felt it. The aura. It followed you. Yeah, and Andy didn't even have a bike. I felt the weights and the headaches coming back, and then I started hearing something behind me. It sounded like an animal. Can you describe it? I'm glad you brought that up. It was kind of like growling, whining all at once. Way after all of this happened, I tried to track that sound down. It wasn't quite as high pitched as a hyena, but that's the best frame of reference I could find to describe it. Was it laughing? No, maybe not. It really fucked me up though. I decided to double back and got my knife out. You had a knife? Dude, of course I did. You think I'd go into the woods at night without something to defend myself? You don't have a knife on you right now, do you? I plead the fifth. Me too. Shit, I hope that's not a bluff, Bill. We could run into anything out here. Anyway, back to me almost shitting myself in the woods. I got my knife out, started heading back to my bike, and then it charged at me. What was it? At the time, I didn't get a good look, but it was strong. It ran at me from the side, pushing into me with a lot more force than I expected. I flew through the air, dropping the flashlight, but kept keeping hold of the knife and fell a few yards away. I rolled into it as best I could. I sort of bounced off the ground a bit before colliding with the base of a tree. Jesus, how hurt were you? A few bruised ribs and a fractured ego. I was fine, but I had the wind knocked out of me. And that's when I saw the silhouette. It was lean, fit, bipedal, and not very tall. It was standing by the flashlight, which was pointed towards the way back to the trail. I held my knife out and tried to say something tough, some tough nonsense, but then my headache really kicked in. I could barely see it. And I almost dropped the knife, but I held onto a feeling in that moment, and that strength kept the knife in my hand. I hoped, prayed to myself that Andy was still out there somewhere. The creature and squatted down, grabbed the flashlight and turned it to me. I was blinded by the light, and in that moment, I heard it running away. When my headache started to fade back to a dull throb, I got up and retrieved my flashlight. I returned to the hangout spot, where I found that my bike's tyres had been torn to pieces. What an arsehole, am I right? Was the whole area trashed? No, it was fine. My bike was still leaning against the table and everything. It had to be Andy. Then why would a wild animal destroy the tyres and nothing else? Oh, we both know it wasn't Andy. I walked home, leaving the bike behind, and then got into bed. The next morning, when I saw Andy, he seemed smug. He smirked at me and said something like, "I heard you sneaking out last night. Where did you go?" I lost my cool and just snapped back, "Hey, why aren't your eyes green anymore?" He just frowned and returned to his room. I kept an eye on him all day. He was getting more and more stir-crazy. Instead of going out again, I stayed up and listened for Andy. I heard him leave, and then I heard him come back about an hour later. The next morning, he had green eyes again. Did he take someone else that night? No. He was still going nuts in the house, more screaming, more attempts to leave. My parents were getting mad at me for not leaving him alone, but didn't stop it at all. They were docile. I wasn't. But he didn't take anyone. Well, how could he? The curfew was in effect. The kids were all inside, sleeping, and the deputies were watching the neighbourhoods. The sheriff didn't consider Andy one of the missing children, remember? The case was still open. And so the same situation that allowed him to walk freely before was now trapping him. Fascinating. That was its mistake. It knew we were getting close to something on the trail, and so it came to us and pretended to be Andy. When the distraction wasn't working anymore, it defended its secrets by attacking me as I got close. Yeah, close to the nest. Hell yeah. Everything came to a head one Sunday morning. This was early December, about a month since it last fed. When it was used to bi-weekly meals. Yeah, it was getting close to Christmas, so I convinced my parents the day before that we should all go to church. We set the plans, made sure we got our nice clothes ready, and then I got real sick. Another terrible headache? No. At that point, the aura was weak, even when Andy was close. I pretended that I was coming down with something and told them I'd have to stay home. Andy was furious, but I insisted that they not let me spoil the family's plans. He didn't have an excuse to stay home, so he went with them. And you went straight to the trail. No, I called Clive. I told him that Andy knew where the other kids were. What? Yeah, a dick move, I know. Even worse, I told him they were still alive, and that Andy had escaped from where they were being taken on the night we found them. Why lie to the Sheriff Simmons? Because I knew the power of hope. Even with a weakened aura, I was the only one showing a real resistance to it. I didn't know why, but maybe it was because I knew the truth of the source. Maybe being so close built up a tolerance, because I watched over him so much. I needed help. Someone who I knew I could convince to be hopeful. Also, I needed a ride. So he come calling, driven by the hopeful lie that you fed to him. I was desperate, and he was getting more aggressive by the day, and I didn't know how much longer he would stand it before he lost his patience with me. About that, why would the Hope Eater allow you to keep it inside? If it ran off, tried to get away from me, I'd call the sheriff and report Andy missing. Also, I'd know where to go find it. It was a creature of habit, so it wouldn't have anywhere to go with another adopted child. But it could just overpower you, correct? It preyed on vulnerable children, Bill. That's not what something strong does. Anyway, Sheriff Simmons came to my house. I'd threatened on the phone that I would only show him where the place was if he took me along, and so he showed up on his motorcycle. Just like that. I dangled the carrot of solving this terrible case. He bit. Not a surprise. We were down the trail in maybe 20 minutes. The ride was even easier in the daytime. When we reached the hangout spot, he asked, "How many people should we expect up ahead?" 5. I lied. The 4 kids and the guy who took them. He drew his pistol and said, "Okay, lead the way, Michael." We didn't get very far off the path when we saw it, a mass at the top of this huge tree. At first, it looked like a treehouse made of tons of branches stuck together, but I couldn't see with what. The nest. The nest. Instead of wood planks now to the side of the tree, long spaces had been cut away by what looked like claw marks. The sheriff pointed his gun to the hole near the floor of the nest and called up. "Cooper Sheriff's Department. Whoever's up there, you need to come down here right now. This is Sheriff Simmons. Come out with your hands up." No one answered. "I'll go up," I told the sheriff. He was confused. "Wait a minute. You shouldn't go up if the kidnapper is up there. We should call him down." I considered telling him the truth, but couldn't risk being left alone. "Listen, clearly there's no one here. No one's been reported missing recently, so there's no one up there." The sheriff got annoyed. "And what about the children? Where are they?" I sighed. "Well, they still might be up there. It's been a long time, Sheriff." He just shook his head. "I'm going up there. Give me a holler if you see anyone. Actually, here." He handed me his radio. "Call the deputies too. Winslow is on a break, so he can come running if something happens." I watched from below as he holstered his pistol and climbed the tree, barely able to manage with only the carved out holes for assistance. When he got up there, the sheriff didn't fully enter and fumbled to try and get his flashlight out of his pocket. The radio went off and I couldn't understand it at first, and so I pressed the call button down and asked for them to repeat it. And it said, "1065, Sheriff, we have a 1065, over." I didn't know what that meant, so I called up, "Hey Sheriff, what's a 1065? He looked down, his face pale. "What?" "1065, I asked again. "Missing person. Christ, not again. We need to go." "No," I called up to him. "We're so close, Sheriff. What's up there?" He started climbing down. "Don't go up there, Michael. Do not go up there." I got back on the radio. "Deputy, do we have a name for the 1065? "It's Andrew Roberts again, sir. His parents said he wandered off with everyone. Was filling out of the church." "The church isn't too far from the elementary school, right?" "Not too far from here, either. The thing's fast, too." I decided to finally tell the sheriff the truth as he got back down, and he interrupted me. "Andy again? What's happening? Did they take him again?" "No," I told him. "Listen, Sheriff, you just have to trust me on this. Andy is the person who took the kids. Except it's not really Andy. It's something that's pretending to be Andy." "What in the hell are you saying to me?" He seemed more than confused, disgusted by what I was telling him. Something is taking children and pretending to be them. We didn't find Andy in the woods that night. We found the thing that killed them." I could see the hopelessness return to him. "No, we found them. We found your brother." It pained him to consider the truth. I pointed south. "Get a hold of yourself, Sheriff. It's on the way. The 1065 was Andy because it knows we're here. It's strong. We need to be ready for that." He put a hand on his pistol, but didn't pull it out. "What are you asking me to do? Shoot your brother? What's wrong with you?" At first, I thought the frustration of this was what made my head pound so much. "It's coming," I realised. "It's almost here." From south of us, I could hear it running. We stood against the tree, under the treehouse, and the sheriff drew his gun. Then Andy came walking through the woods. He was confused by the sheriff's presence there. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. The sheriff stepped forward. "This is where you were taken, right, Andy?" "Yeah," he said, smiling weakly. "I'm so glad you found me." The sheriff took another step. "Who took you?" "Andy." "Andy? Who abducted you, Andy?" Andy had to stop from smiling, but I could see a devious sparkle in his eyes. "Mikey did. He's been in town the whole time, taking all of us. He let me live, but he hurt everyone else. They're up there." Then he pointed up to the treehouse. The sheriff turned to me, turning his back to Andy. "Michael Roberts, you're under..." And then Andy struck. He ran to the sheriff and clawed at his arm, forcing him to drop the gun. Andy ran around the sheriff and grabbed at his shirt collar, pulling him to the ground. He held his hand up and I saw the long, pink claws where his fingers just were. Shreds of skin were flapping around the base of the claws. I threw the radio at him, and when Andy stared me down, I pulled my knife out. "Come on, arsehole!" I yelled at him. He turned his full attention to me, and my head started pounding harder than it ever had before. I couldn't stand up straight or even hold my knife this time. Something about seeing this creature, shreds of my brother's skin falling from around his clawed hand, really hit me. Andy was dead. He was really dead. This thing was just wearing his skin. "Finally," it said to me, the facade of Andy's voice fully gone from its mouth. "You stubborn cunt. Feel it. Feel me." I could barely see. I could barely hold my head up. The creature sliced at Andy's clothes and the skin as it approached me, letting shreds of my brother fall away. What remained was a slimy, pink-skinned creature. It still wore my brother's face, but most of him had been shed from its form. The creature held my head in its clawed hand. "You feel it, boy? Do you feel it?" I stared into its eyes, Andy's eyes. I knew I was helpless. Hopeless. Yeah. Then the sheriff's gun went off, and the creature fell to its knees, clutching at its shoulder. Dark red blood poured out of it, and suddenly I couldn't feel anything holding me down. The creature's attention wasn't on me anymore. I punched it in the face as hard as I could, and the skin of Andy's cheek was pushed to the side. I grabbed it by the neck and pulled it to the ground, wailing on it, punching my dead brother's face over and over again. And when I heard the sheriff telling me to stop, I threw one final punch on the side of the temple, and his eyes came flying out of the creature's sockets, and only emptied black holes remained. I stood up, finally free of the monster, finally free of its control, and almost collapsed from exhaustion. This wasn't the effect of some aura. It was the weight of my own emotional and physical fatigue kicking in. The sheriff got on the radio and started calling numbers I couldn't hear very well. I could barely stay conscious. Then the creature got back to his feet and pulled the sheriff to the ground again before either of us could get up. It was running north, past the nest and away from Cooper. While we waited for the deputies, the sheriff asked what the story would be. I said the first thing that came to my head: bear attack. And we went with that when the deputies arrived. And the deputies have believed that? No, but the sheriff swore them the secrecy. They saw his clawed up arm and didn't ask any questions. Hell, they didn't even ask about what they'd found in the nest. Did you ever take a look? Not inside the nest, but I did see the deputies carry the pieces out. Bones covered in bite marks, decaying eyeballs, and the suits. Suits? Covered in the same slimy material as the Hope Eater's real skin. Something about it seemed to keep the skin from decaying. There were long holes along the back. So it pacified the adults with the aura, wore the skins of its victims, and walked throughout Cooper without anyone knowing that a monster was amongst the children. Yeah. What about Brianna Thompson? She was alone, walking by the trail. The monster didn't need a suit to grab her. Were any other remains recovered? No. From what the sheriff told me not too long before he resigned, they scoured the woods and couldn't find anything else. He must have showed up, grabbed the Thompson girl, and started from there. When it was all over, everyone started blaming the sheriff. Suddenly everyone had the clarity to realise how stupid the curfew idea was, including him. That's why it's been so tough on him. He had to shoot a kid, or at least something that looked like one, to stop it from taking any more victims. That fucks with your head. Imagine trying to help kids, and after months of failing, you point your gun at one and pull the trigger. Did he drive it off? Was the creature gone for good? So far, Sheriff Winslow is doing a great job keeping their patrols of the north side of town up, and everyone's watching the kids like a hawk. Note, at this point, we've gone far past the trail's turn, and we're reaching our destination. During this time, we spoke of the personal matters that will not be transcribed here, including my own brushes with the paranormal. I may feel ready to speak on that matter in my own time, but not yet. As I was told countless times by Michael, patience. We arrived at the end of the trail, where I expected to see a messy hangout spot complete with tarps and beer cans. Instead, we approached a small gravestone with 5 names on it. Brianna I. Thompson, October 23rd, 2009 to September 10th, 2018. Stephen Palmer, April 3rd, 2010 to September 29th, 2019. Alison Geller, September 1st, 2009, October the 7th, 2019. Carlos Navarro, March 16th, 2011 to October 20th, 2019. Andrew Roberts, December the 7th, 2009 to November the 6th, 2019. The gravestone was surrounded by fresh flowers, Michael explained. They're not buried here, in case you're wondering. After the sheriff said this place was definitely safe, people started coming here to pay their respects. The sheriff paid for this, and from what I understand, he did the cleanup by himself. We're not just here for this though. Come on. Past the trail's end, we walked to the base of a tree. The tree house was exactly as Michael described it. As I approached, I could feel some oppressive force overwhelming me. Is this the aura? Yeah. Nowhere else in town, even Andy's room, has this feeling. Why is it here? Maybe because the nest is held together by a strange, slimy material that looks like what was on the skin suits. Maybe it's the fact that the Hope Eater consumed its victims here. Maybe it's the very ground it's desecrated because of what it did. Or the blood. Oh, yeah, it bled here. That's a good point. Anyway, I knew that you needed to feel it as an outsider only coming to Cooper long after everything has ended. I thought you needed that feeling. Now that you know that it's real. God, I need to leave this place. Huh, good call. We returned to the gravestone to pay our respects before we went back to the start of the trail. Michael and I spoke about one final detail. Michael, you told me that this was all about telling Andy's story, but Andy was clearly gone before you even arrived in Cooper. Why did you really tell me this story? Yeah, you're right. It wasn't Andy's story. It was the story that Sheriff refuses to tell. He didn't tell the parents, the deputies, even his own wife. He let everything he built up for himself fall away as speculation, blame and even suspicion surrounding him. I told you, he was a good man. Now you know. Also, obviously I want people to be prepared if this happens to them. Don't get it twisted though. I'm not telling people to believe the impossible, and I get it, because I couldn't let myself believe it until I saw the proof. It would be too unfair to judge others for not taking that leap of faith. That's not my goal. That's not why I accepted your request for an interview. Then why did you? It's like this. Everyone would make fun of you if you told them that werewolves existed. But if people start getting mauled to death every full moon, nobody's going to think you're an idiot for staying inside all night and stocking up on silver bullets. If bodies keep piling up in a small town like Cooper, drained of their blood with 2 holes in their necks, even the atheists would start carrying a cross with them. People would try to find holy water online, whittle old chair legs and other furniture into steaks, and buy up all the garlic they can. All of it. Hell, look at all the zombie movies and TV shows out there. You ask a stranger if they have a zombie plan in case they wake up in the middle of an apocalypse. There's a good chance they do, or at least they could come up with one on the spot. And everyone at least knows to aim for the head and not let them bite you. The thing I'm talking to you about, the thing I named the Hope Eater, isn't a known creature like the others. There's no popular fiction about it. There's no groups of believers who try to spread the word. I've looked, and I can't even find an example of this happening before. But I do know that it's still alive. It's still out there. I don't give a shit if people refuse to believe the story I told you, so long as they know what to look out for in case it happens in their town. It's a simple message. If kids start going missing in town, and you can feel everyone giving up, you need to keep a hold of your hope. That's your strength. That's your defense against it. Shit. Even if it's just some sexual predator or child killer or whatever, it's still important to try and find them. I call it the Hope Eater because of how it affects the adults. But really, hope is a weakness. Sure, it's a strong and dangerous creature, but the Hope Eater's real power is making you give up. I know that because it made me give up, and Clive Simmons saved my life because he refused to. After months of giving up, he was able to stop. You and I both understand that the impossible is out there. You, with the whole redacted thing you told me about, and me with the Hope Eater. We function in a different way than most people, because when we see something's off, we know that a Cam's razor doesn't always apply. The most simple, logical possibility is something that we don't look at in the same way. We're not stupid, but we're not skeptics either. There are things that bump in the night, terrifying things that are simply beyond understanding. I'm not telling anyone to believe me, not even you, but it's the truth. My name is Bill Campbell. Like many of you, I've come face to face with the impossible and found myself unable to explain my experience away with rationalities. Ever since, I've made it my life's work to find more impossible truths from all across the country, stories that are both real and beyond understanding. This was one of those stories. Thank you for following me on this journey. This was my first investigation into the paranormal, but it certainly won't be the last. I hope to bring something impossible to you again in the near future. Stay tuned. Wow, absolutely awesome stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed that one as much as I. Please, of course, do let me know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, help build our channel and our community. And we're so close to the 20,000 subscriber mark. It's getting crazy. A lot of specials in store for you for that. Stay tuned for that. As ever, huge thank you to the author, FoggyGlassEye. And above all, guys, I hope you're all happy and well, had a productive week, and looking forward to relaxing over the weekend. Relaxing with good weather, good food, and good company. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.